So Donald Trump, during his presidential campaign, he promised to protect American jobs. That's good, right? I would be in favor of that because I'm in favor of people having jobs. Now, he did promise to protect jobs in both coal and in steel, right? Now, he also promised to save a lot of jobs, for example, in Carrier, right? Now, how's that worked out? Well, I'm going to look at this objectively, right? And I want to show you how well he actually did. Now, Carrier, recently, there was some bad news for a lot of Carrier workers. They actually laid off hundreds of workers recently and are now moving a production line to Mexico. Now remember, Carrier is the company that got a $7 million special break in order to keep jobs in America. That was something that Donald Trump was incredibly proud of, right? And look, when that happened, I wanted to give him credit. But at the same time, I'm like, boy, that $7 million deal, well, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money we're throwing at a corporation and to try to entice them into keeping jobs there. Well, what's going to prevent them from going and holding these jobs for ransom now? And I think that was a good question. So nonetheless, okay, their jobs were temporarily saved. And then guess what? They ended up laying off more. And again, they're moving these workers these jobs to Mexico. And there's a lot of people that are going to end up losing their jobs, which is terrible. Okay, so Carrier didn't work out. What about coal, right? Donald Trump wanted to save the coal industry. Well, last year, coal created about 500 jobs total. Now, Scott Pruitt came out recently and said, oh, no, you don't understand. Coal, we saved about 50,000 coal jobs. No, that's actually not what happened. 50,000 is actually how many coal workers are left in America. So no, he didn't save 50,000 coal jobs. That's how many coal jobs exist. The number is actually about 500 that were created. Now, that's something, right? But wait, that's actually not, because according to a new article by CNN, they've reported that a coal mine near Pennsylvania-West Virginia border is now due to close, which would eliminate a total of 370 jobs. So of those jobs that they created, 370 are going away. And look, that actually sucks, especially for the workers, right? Now, I empathize with the workers. These are people that actually believe that Donald Trump could bring back coal. Now, unfortunately for them, market forces, and this is not overregulation because Donald Trump removed a lot of the regulations that President Obama had put into place, and nonetheless, they are still shedding jobs because, again, it's not overregulation, it's market forces. Coal is just too expensive compared to natural gas. And so, of course, the jobs are going to natural gas. No matter how much you try to prop up the coal industry, it's not going to go anywhere. And again, that's sad for a lot of these workers, right, who are actually hoping that Donald Trump would be able to keep his promise to keep these coal jobs open. So coal, not doing very well. Carrier is laying people off, and they're going to Mexico. So what about steel, right? Now, there's a problem as well. While I don't have job numbers on steel, I do know that steel and steelwork has actually been down. It actually hasn't gotten better. And the problem is that you have a problem with dumping, right? So one of the big issues with steel prices is that China can make steel far cheaper than America. And then what they do is that they'll just dump the steel, right? That causes a huge, steep decline in the prices of steel, which makes American steel workers and steel companies unable to compete with China. So that's a big, big problem, right? That puts American steel workers out of work. President Trump promised to bring those steel jobs back. Now, one of the ways that he wanted to do that was look into that practice, right? Do an investigation that would come up with solutions by the summer of 2017, and also put diplomatic pressure on China. Now, did any of those things happen? No, unfortunately, they did not. The summer obviously has come and gone, And there is no results from any of that investigation, nor is there any pressure on China. In fact, Donald Trump has loosened pressure on China in order to help entice them to deal with North Korea, which I think actually is a smart action, right? But you're not exactly able to put pressure on China if you're also being soft on China in order to have a diplomatic goal. Which, again, I agree with, because nobody wins in a war with North Korea. And if China can put enough pressure on North Korea to tamp down on their nuclear weapons, then that's great. Then that would be a win overall. But I'm saying from the steelworkers' perspective, they have not received a win. And, of course, again, they're understandably upset. In fact, in an interview with CNN, United Steelworkers President Leo Gerard said that American workers are now, in some ways, worse off than they were a year ago. He said, "We're terribly disappointed and hugely frustrated. There's been no action that has done anything to protect and defend American jobs. In some cases, we are worse off now than we were then." So, look, this is not an easy problem to take on. This is actually a very nuanced problem, right? So, for one, if you end up increasing tariffs on China, then you could risk going into a trade war with the Chinese. That could have some unintended consequences for our economy, and I'm not necessarily sure if those consequences will be good or bad, considering how much of a trade or how much trade we actually do with China. So, okay. But that is one direction that you could go, right? On that, have we seen any sort of indication that we're going to go that way? Well, Steve Bannon was actually a big proponent of entering a trade war with China. Donald Trump doesn't seem very interested in doing so. In fact, I don't necessarily believe that Trump cares about crafting a nuanced policy position that would, A, help steelworkers, and B, make it so that we don't necessarily get into what could be a disastrous trade war with China. Okay, so again, what do we do with this situation? Not entirely sure, right? And what is Trump going to do with this situation? Again, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think he's smart enough to do anything. I mean, the guy can barely pay attention enough to read anything that's bigger than a tweet. So what he has done, though, is that his positions are deregulate everything and do giant tax cuts. Well, for one, going back to coal, he's deregulated coal, right? Even with all that, and trying to prop up the coal industry, which failed, there was actually a five-person panel appointed by Donald Trump to try and prop up the coal industry that didn't work. It actually got rejected. So he couldn't prop up the coal industry. But nonetheless, he has tried to, in other areas, and successfully has deregulated a lot of rules around the coal industry, and also generally given giant tax cuts to corporations. Now, in return for those giant tax cuts, some of these companies have given out some bonuses, but of course, there's some strings attached to that one. There's some caveats on that. For one, they're only for qualified employees. For example, the $1,000 bonuses that Walmart was giving out was only for people who had been there for 20 years. So the majority of those people receiving those $1,000 bonuses is actually very small. Not only that, but they've shed a lot of jobs and are basically using that money not to create jobs, not to raise wages overall, but mostly to do more stock buybacks, which inflates shareholder profit. So what Donald Trump has done economically is basically given corporations everything that they've ever wanted, but with no strings. No promises of job creation, just, hey, here you go. Let's make it rain. And he did that, I think, because he benefits from that. Not only does he save money, but he's also made some very rich CEOs very, very happy, and they are more likely now to support him. The problem with that is that it does not trickle down to the workers. And we've seen that over and over and over again. So, look, I'm sorry to say, but if you're a steel worker or if you're a coal miner and you voted for Donald Trump, then you've been conned. you have fallen for the snake oil, you have fallen for the con job. And it sucks, and I'm sorry to have to point that out to you, but the jobs that you were hoping for, the pay that you were hoping for, it's just not going to happen. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.